Innanzitutto, Eccellenza,
Your Excellency, first of all, thank you for giving us your time. I would like to begin by asking you to describe the work of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors in the Catholic Church, of which you are the Secretary.
Llevamos 11 años como Comisión Pontificia.
We've been a Pontifical Commission for 11 years, an institution created by Pope Francis. We're responsible for policies for abuse prevention in the Universal Church, and we do this through the universal guidelines that we're working on. We also do this through our annual report. We've already published the second report and we're working on the third one. We also accompany episcopal conferences and assist some of them that need help. And we do this through an initiative called Memorare. The most important thing for us as a Pontifical Commission is to listen to the victims always on an ongoing basis, which is one of the tasks we do every day.
There is sometimes a perceived separation between the Church's mission of spreading the word of Christ and the culture of safeguarding that the Church always promotes and takes ahead. So I would like to ask you, what are the gospel-based roots of safeguarding?
Cuando hablamos nosotros de tutela, de protección, de prevención.
When we talk about safeguarding, protection and prevention, we're talking about the very root of the gospel. It's impossible to separate one thing from another. There's a passage in the Bible that strikes me deeply. It's the text of Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus not only invites us to be sensitive towards the vulnerable, but he himself becomes vulnerable. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was thirsty, I was hungry, and you gave me food and drink. In other words, Jesus himself becomes fragile and vulnerable. This sensitivity to protect, to safeguard, to defend the human person is at the heart of the gospel. That is, the proclamation of the Word of God is closely linked to safeguarding and protection. It's impossible to separate one from the other. When we talk about enculturation in the Church, we're also talking about an enculturation of protection, of safeguarding. And that is also why the greatest scandal is precisely when one of these minors, these children, these fragile beings, are violated and abused. It's a terrible scandal. This question reminds me of my years responsible formation in the seminary. I did this for 11 years. But I'm aware that we cannot simply insist on this formation only for consecrated ministers. It's an integral formation for everyone, for all of us who are part of the Church. One of the fundamental points is formation in human and emotional developments. And when we speak of formation in human and emotional development, we're referring to very specific elements that we all experience. Families, married people, consecrated persons, consecrated lay people. In other words, these are issues that affect each one of us, such as interpersonal relationships, how to deal with frustration and loneliness. This world of relationships should be fully integrated in each of our processes and in all our work as members of the Church. It is a key element emphasized by the Synod on synodality.
Grazie.
This brings us to the Focolare movement. I would like to ask you how a culture of safeguarding can help a spirituality such as ours, which is a spirituality of communion, but also how can it be mutual?
I am very grateful to the Focolare movement for being part of this second annual report, because the fact that you, as a movement, have accepted it, it's already a sign, a step forward in your desire to create a culture of safeguarding in each of your initiatives for evangelization. But these initiatives, let's say this culture of safeguarding, must continue to take shape in each of these processes and procedures for abuse prevention, because these procedures cannot just be drawn up and presented to others. They must also be put into practice. That is, they must be presented to each of the communities, the movements, and individuals who are part of this movement. Therefore, this implies that ongoing formation in policies for abuse prevention is necessary. In addition, victims must be given permanent, constant attention and a listening ear so that they really feel listened to and are actively involved. These ongoing listening processes are key, as they allow us not only to know what we're doing, but also what is lacking. In this regard, the culture of safeguarding also becomes part of a spirituality of communion that you, as a movement, emphasize so much.
I was very struck by the emphasis Pope Leo placed in his final address to the recent consistory of cardinals on 3 points in particular: growth in our listening, in relationships, and in communion. What contribution can a culture of safeguarding give to these points? How do you see them being put into practice?
Me llama la atención esa expresión que
I am struck by the expression you use, culture of safeguarding. I would like to enrich this expression, culture of safeguarding, with the spirituality of safeguarding. A spirituality that is closely connected with communion, with a spirituality of communion, where it is necessary for the two to interact more and more in our work and in our experience of evangelization. When we talk about this, we're talking about the person as a gift, who must be respected in their dignity. Every wound inflicted on the dignity of the person is a wound inflicted on the communion of human beings. Furthermore, we also insist that authority is a service, and therefore we avoid the abuse of power when we become aware of that authority as a service. But we also insist that the wound is not only inflicted on a specific person, but also on the community which suffers, their family, the parish, the community, the movement, all those involved. This is why any process of prevention must involve the community itself. The community must be involved, and the victim must also be involved in this process.
Debe estar implicada en este proceso.
Vorrei continuare rispetto a quello che lei diceva.
I would like to continue with what you were saying, a spirituality of safeguarding. Your second report, which the Commission presented last October, was produced with the invaluable help of, if I have read correctly, 40 groups of victims. What was this experience like, and what do you have to say to our organization and indeed to the whole Church?
Este es el segundo reporte anual que nosotros hemos presentado.
This is the second annual report that we presented. One of the things that has struck us most, and that we have learned, is that listening to the victims is not something neutral. Something has to happen, something has to occur. Listening must not only be empathetic, but also effective. And that is why listening is part of the whole process of reparation, which is not merely limited to listening. That is why I insist that victims should not only be listened to with empathy, but also involved in the processes of reparation and evangelization, and obviously also in the policies for abuse prevention. I would insist on strategic communication.
Una comunicación que vaya en todos estos procesos.
Communication that is part of all these processes, both internally and externally. Sometimes, let's say, things are done, proposals are presented, but they are not communicated properly. In fact, speaking of all these listening groups and victims that we've listened to in the second annual report, every single victim has told us that one of the church's weak points is communication. They haven't felt listened to. And in the communication processes themselves, the language we use has sometimes not made them feel listened to or accompanied. I would insist on this issue.
Grazie, Eccellenza.
Thank you very much.
A ustedes
Thank
también.
you.
Muchas gracias.
And thank you. Thank you.